Well, hello again, everyone. I'm Robert Craig, and if you've been seeing any of my videos, you know that I'm here to do what I do. Just an old man reading from his Bible, and we're going to be using the Holy Bible, King James Version. I want to go back to something that I kind of dealt with last year after my wife passed away. After nearly 40 years, or 45 years together, um, I changed my study habits up, and I spent some time researching on what the Bible said about the dynamics of death itself, the dynamics and the process, and what happens, how it works. And naturally, I wanted to know everything I could, uh, mainly to seek some comfort during the loss, and put out a pretty extensive study on it in text form. And at some point early this year, maybe back in the summertime, it dawned on me that I wasn't really getting much traction at all with text, but a lot of people were getting some traction with videos. A friend of mine had been trying to get me to do videos for several years. He said, "You really ought to try that. It's much more effective." So I started making videos earlier this year, and it was hard to get started, but as it went on, I felt more and more comfortable with it, with speaking about Bible teaching. And I think a good place to start is one of the earlier mentions of death, and it's a pretty good illustration of what happens when someone dies. And I'm going from the standpoint of a person being made up of a body, a soul, and a spirit, because that's what Scripture does mention, that we're kind of a three-part being. And I want to start in Genesis chapter 35. And let's start at verse 16. Jacob is coming back from Laban, where he had spent over 20 years working to pay his father-in-law for the wives that he gained and the livestock, all of his wealth that he had picked up. He comes back to Bethel. In verse 16 it says, "And they journeyed from Bethel, and there was but a little way to come to Ephrath." Well, Ephrath is, of course, that's an old name for Bethlehem. "And Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor." She was in labor because she was about to bear a son. "And it came to pass, when she was in hard labor, that the midwife said unto her, Fear not, thou shalt have this son also." Somehow or other they knew it was a son. Jacob had the 12 sons who were the 12 patriarchs, and he also had a daughter of whom very little is said, but there was some things that happened over Dinah. Verse 18, "And it came to pass, as her soul was in departing, for she died." That's an explanation of why this writer said, "as her soul was in departing," and he's making it clear that by that he means she died. And that's what happens according to Scripture. That's what happens when you die. Your soul departs. I had a good friend on Facebook, and he and I both worked together. We managed one of the big study groups, and and I'm still on the admin board on that group. And some of his writings are still there. He made up some of the rules for the group, and I really hated to see him go. But he had been trying for the longest time to convince me of something that looked an awful lot like soul sleep. His theory was, it is well thought out, that when a person dies, it's kind of like a candle flame going out. The candle's still there, and the fuel is within the candle itself, and the flame, well, it goes out. When the candle burns down, there's nothing left of it. In other words, it's like the body being used up. The flame just goes out. It doesn't go anywhere. It just goes out. It disappears, ceases to exist, and then in the resurrection, it's all kind of recreated or something like that. And I told him, I don't really buy into this soul sleep thing. And he said, "Oh, this is not soul sleep. I don't believe in soul sleep either." And I don't know. It kind of reminded me of that movie I saw where this one character, when he was asked, "How's that little business enterprise of yours working?" and he said, "People think it's a pyramid scheme, but it's not." Well, usually if you think it's a pyramid scheme, it's a pyramid scheme. But he said this wasn't soul sleep, but I couldn't see what else you could call it. And it came to pass, as her soul was in departing, she was right in the throes of death, and with her last breaths, for she died, that she called his name Ben-Oni, and his father called him Benjamin. And Ben-Oni, of course, means son of my sorrow, and Benjamin means son of the right hand, which is kind of ironic because they had a really high percentage in that tribe of left-handed men, of which I am one. I'm actually proud to be a lefty. I think it would just, I don't know, I wouldn't like being, I wouldn't trade places with people that are so-called normal to lose that distinctive thing. I've always kind of treasured it and went with it. And Rachel died and was buried in the way to Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. And Jacob set a pillar upon her grave. That is the pillar of Rachel's grave unto this day. I want to skip ahead in the same chapter, verse 27. And Jacob came unto Isaac his father, unto Mamre, unto the city of Arba, which is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac sojourned. And the days of Isaac were 180 years. We covered this the other day. Abram lived to be 175 years old, and Isaac enjoyed a similar long life. And Isaac gave up the ghost and died, and was gathered unto his people, being old and full of days. And his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. So he lived out a full life, and he gave up the ghost. Where do we get the word ghost, and how is it different from a soul? Well, you can't give up yourself. Wherever you go, there you are. You are your soul. And when he gave up the ghost, that means he gave up his spirit. We get the word ghost from the German word Geist, which is the German word for spirit. Commonly used word over there is Zeitgeist, which means spirit of the time. It's kind of like being in step with the time. And Poltergeist, which means noisy spirit. Those are of German origin. But we had some German input into our English language. And that was one of the words that we have. A ghost is a spirit, and a spirit is a ghost. They are the same thing. So he gave up the ghost. And what happened to him? He was gathered unto his people. That takes care of the disposition of his soul. He was gathered unto his people. And as you look at these older patriarchs, you see how they passed on. And that's a common phrase that's used in Scripture. They died and were gathered unto their people. So their people are someplace else. I think we can find an illustration or two of that if we look hard enough. And then what was left of him? What was left was his lifeless body that everything was gone out of. And it ends with, and his sons, Esau and Jacob, buried him. That's what you do with a dead body. You don't keep it around because of obvious reasons. And from there, I think we'll just pick up next time. We'll pick up next time, and we're going to see what Solomon had to say about how death works. But for now, may the Lord bless this reading of His Holy Scripture. I hope you'll find this series interesting enough to come back and go this little journey with me. I found it to be very informative myself, and I hope you will too. I hope to see you next time.